All right. Well, welcome to the Life Matters with Nate and Jen show, our weekly show. And this is episode number 5, if you can believe that. And this is going to be the first part of really a two-parter. It's really, two for the price of one, but you got to stick around for 2 weeks to get the other part of it. And this first part, we're talking about something we've coined the better. And, in typical marriage vows, we have something along the lines of for better or for worse. And so this is the for better installment of the for better or for worse sharing, discussion, whatever you want to call it. And we'll tackle the better aspects today. And next week, we'll pick up with the for worse. And we'll try not to make the for worse depressing. We actually have some positive things to say in some ways to address some of the worse aspects that can happen in a marriage. So next time we'll tackle that.
Yeah, and we talked about, every marriage is going to have its ups and downs. And so how can we just kind of address both? You're going to stick it out through the hard times and enjoy the good times. And so that's what we decided to do this series on.
Yeah. And so we're just going to dive right into what would be considered the better. And we've got a list here. So the better describes when things are going well, obviously, in a marriage. And that can be when the couple is unified together, generally speaking, in their marriage. And when they are happy, when things are going well, when there's relatively smooth sailing. I mean, nobody has a perfect marriage and things go, how they're supposed to all the time. But also when we seem to have a good amount of energy. It could also be in your youth, although you could be older, married, and still have some energy if you're in halfway decent health. Also, the health aspect is part of that. There can be a better aspect of the phase of health that you're in. Enthusiasm in a marriage is certainly part of better. You're happy to be in the marriage, you look forward to the future. And speaking of future, planning things together, that's certainly a better. It helps you have a common goal, it helps you have future goals, looking towards the future. That's all part of a healthy relationship. And then good relationship with extended family. Notice how I didn't say perfect, but a good relationship. There's
Right.
not a lot of tension. There's not
Mhm.
conflict all the time. So those are some aspects of better. Jennifer, you got some others for us here.
Right. The better can also include times of growing spiritually together, times that you're really just focusing on that spiritual side as a couple and individually. Um, Having meaningful friendships with other couples is also something that's really a good part of marriage and
Hmm.
missed when it's not there. Having a great fellowship to belong to, whatever that might look like, other believers, a church that you belong to, having good communication between your spouse and yourself, good companionship, having that idea of being helpmeets for each other, and then fruitfulness. So that your work is bearing fruit. So whatever that might be in your family, maybe with your children, could be your career is successful and bringing enjoyment and fulfillment. Also kingdom work, are you helping to grow the body of believers?
Yeah, those are good ones. So, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's a long list of things that we both came up with that we believe, at least in general terms, describe what can be termed as the better. And we've got a few scriptures that we want to share for your consideration. So we'll divide those up, and Jennifer's going to take the first two.
Sure. Genesis 2:18 says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him." So, God saw that Adam needed someone like him, Eve, another human being, to meet his need for companionship and love And so Genesis 2:18 is one of the first scriptures that came to mind when we're talking about the better.
Yeah.
Um, Also, Ecclesiastes 4:9, which says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. And it goes on to say, two people can help each other out in difficult times, keep each other warm. And so Ecclesiastes, is a book with a lot of wisdom in it about many things, including the marriage relationship.
Yeah, and if you think of Genesis 2:18, the Father said it is not good for man to be alone. So he made things the better by creating Eve.
Right.
And everything that he created was good, and some of it was very good. And certainly male and female was very good at the beginning. And there's a lot of aspects of that Ecclesiastes 4:9. We'll probably use that verse again next week when we talk about the worst, because there's another aspect of that verse I think that could also pertain to that. And then Proverbs 31, I'm not going to read the whole chapter there, but most of us are aware of the qualities of a godly wife, a virtuous wife, someone who's definitely exceeding the needs of that helpmeet. And so that certainly fits into the better. In fact, we're not going to take the time today, but if you want to look at a lot of verses that describe the worse, you can look in Proverbs, and it has all kinds of things, that describe the opposite of a Proverbs
Right.
31 wife. So we're not going to go there because this is the better. But James 1:17, that every good and perfect gift is from above. It comes down from the Father of heavenly lights. It says that in him there's no variation or shifting shadow. So certainly, as we think about the better aspects, of marriage together, we need to be thankful, and we need to understand where those blessings come from. Who's the
Mhm.
originator of all things good? So when we're talking about better, we're talking about his creation. All right. So the creator's plan was that we would have this better scenario. And I don't know, Jennifer, what you think about this, but it's not that the father recognized that everything was going to be peaches and cream all the time and perfect. I mean, he obviously knew that sin was coming, right?
Sure.
In the garden with the temptation from Satan, Adam and Eve. But I think his overall plan is to bless our lives, and
Hmm.
certainly marriage is part of that blessing.
Yeah.
So, you have anything to add to that?
Well, we'll talk about, some of the things that come into our lives that are hardships are outside of our control, but some of those are because of sin,
Yeah,
our sin or someone else's sin that we have a consequence of. But that's not God's intention for us.
yeah,
He wants us to have abundant life. He wants us to have a life full of love and devotion to each other.
yeah. That's a good point. Okay, so we've got two other little sections here we want to cover today. This video may be a little bit shorter, the next two videos, because we're kind of splitting the time. But the last two items that we want to talk about are something called maintaining the better and making the better even better. So I'll do the first part of maintaining the better here. And here's some ways that you can maintain that better aspect in your marriage. Keeping consistency with what you're doing. Again, not perfection, but consistency. Some examples of that might be, for instance, staying involved in your fellowship, in your church family, whatever that looks like, to maintain that spiritual health, to have those connections, to have, to be getting in the word with others and having that sharpening and additional opportunities to worship together.
Hmm.
It's wonderful to worship by yourself or even just among your family, but the more together, I think sometimes that can be a powerful
Hmm.
encouragement. And then also another example might be to continue to maintain that open communication in your relationship. Each party, the husband and the wife, have the ability to share their thoughts, their feelings, concerns, just to have an open, honest discussion. Doesn't mean there won't ever be, disagreements or just not
Right.
seeing eye to eye on things, but that is maintained as a healthy relationship. And then don't be neglectful. That's an important one. Don't let other items in your life, which are less important, become more important than the
Hmm.
things that we've already shared about being better.
Other ways to maintain that better relationship is not to be complacent. So we don't want to just think, okay, we're married, we have our spouse, and kind of take it for granted. We
Yeah, we
need
got a
to,
ring.
yeah,
We don't need to do anything else.
right. I mean, it can be easy to just coast, but that's not going to help your marriage grow.
Yeah,
So um, take your commitment seriously and realize that a covenant requires continued work.
yeah.
Um, and another way is to um, not focus on other people's so-called better. So
Mm,
we tend to see other couples and assume that they've got it all figured out. Or I think social media kind
mm,
of tempts us to see other people's highlight reel, and we don't know if their life is really that perfect as what they're showing on Facebook or
yeah.
Instagram, whatever. Or maybe, maybe they've got a lot of struggles behind the scenes as well. But really, we just need to focus on our own relationship, not covet someone else's relationship that we think is better.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So playing the comparison game is never going to help us win. We don't know
Yeah,
if theirs is really better,
yeah.
and that's their business anyway.
It's
So
kind of like that grass is always greener on the other side. You
right.
could apply that to marriage and you could say, oh, if we were just like so and so, or if I was married to so and so,
Hmm.
they just seem so happy and they're so upbeat and blah, blah, blah. Well,
Right.
a lot of people unfortunately walk around with plastic smiles on their face,
Hmm.
because they're trying to keep up appearances. And you might find that if it's like some of these movies, like the Parent Trap, and then Freaky Friday, and all these different movies where people switched. If you had a moment to switch and walked a week in their shoes, you'd
Right.
probably say, "Whoa, I wish I could go back."
Yeah.
Because at least the problems that I do have, I know about those problems. I
Hmm.
I recognize them. I know how to deal with them, and I think you would miss the good things in your marriage. So that's a really
Definitely.
good point.
I agree. And maintaining the better, one last way that we thought of is to choose your friendships with other couples wisely. So be around other couples that are working on their marriage and they're setting a good example. Years ago, when we were in college, we were
Yeah,
friends with another young couple, and we were all young couples, but they were always bickering and fighting. And I discovered myself that when we hung out with them, I felt more irritable towards
mm,
Nate. And um, I realized that, they were kind of wearing off on me.
yeah,
And we didn't stop being their friends, but we kind of limited as much time that we were going to spend with them. And that was kind of an eye opener for me that they were, you know, I don't know if it was just the atmosphere when we were around them, but when we are around other couples that show their love for each
mm,
other, that can be contagious in a good way as well. So
sure.
spend your time around other couples that are treating each other with love and respect, and working on their marriage.
Yeah. So that's some examples of maintaining the better. And to kind of finish things off here, we'll just share a few thoughts regarding making the better even better. So, you might say, yeah, I got a good marriage. Okay, great. That's a blessing. But, it could be, certain aspects could make it a great marriage. So,
Hmm.
why would you not want to have a great marriage? Why would you not want to improve on something that's the foundation is already very good, but you could make it that much better? And so, some items here, some examples, or I guess some thoughts, suggestions. Number one, to pray fervently about your marriage, to ask the Father, please give us, give me, make the focus about yourself. Because, we can always look at our spouse and come up with a list of things that they're not doing the way we want it, or, they're falling short in something. They could do the same about us. But pray, we used to say this in the professional circles that we ran in, counseling and working with severely emotionally disturbed kids, as counselors and, just caregivers. And we would say, focus
Focus
on
on
your
your
own
own
treatment,
treatment.
like, well, Johnny did blah, 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 and he's a
Yeah.
blah, 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 and I ate his guts. And okay, yeah, all right. Some of that might be true, but, you have issues too. You have your own issues. So focus on your own treatment and you'll actually get along better with others. So ask the Father for a proper focus for yourself, spiritual focus, For husbands, do I love my wife? Do I cherish my wife? Am I considerate? Focus on how can I be a blessing in my marriage? How can I make my marriage better? Our marriage better. And then study some examples of healthy marriages. Not just, as Jennifer said, when you're choosing your friends, we all want to choose some
Mhm.
examples of a healthy, good, godly marriage, but also get in the word. There are couples in the Bible that had good marriages and bad
Mhm.
marriages.
Mhm.
And, take the good from the good. Look at those examples, study it out, pray about being, in the same vein as those couples. These couples treat each other with love. They had the proper, respect and submission and whatever else. Follow that. Meditate on the will of the Father. If you think about it, some things we take for granted. Oh yeah, well I know what that's about. But if we were focusing on His plan for marriage and His desire to bless us, and how much of a blessing it could be, maybe that could be a game changer. It'd be kind of like well, I know what love is. Okay, yeah, I know what Christian love is. But if you read and meditated on First Corinthians, 13,
Mhm.
um, every single day, it'd probably be a game changer, right? Uh, let's see. And humbly admit areas that need work.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a toughie, right? But admit where there's some weaker areas, where maybe it's good, but it could be much better because there's a few weak areas there,
Mhm.
and then be willing to put in the work, for your spouse to make that even better. I think the rewards will speak for themselves.
Okay, so we just kind of wanted to wrap this up by saying enjoy the times of the better in
Yeah,
your marriage. Marriage is kind of a roller coaster. There are going to be better times than others, really good mountaintop times.
yeah,
There's going to be some hard times in any marriage. And so, kind of appreciating when things are going well and noticing them and giving thanks for the good times that can also help you make it through the valleys,
yeah,
focusing on, just perseverance and that commitment that you have, the relationship that you have. And like Nate said, we shouldn't just coast through. We should always want to be improving on our marriage.
yeah, absolutely. So, in the next video, we're going to share obviously the for worse aspect of
Da, da,
that
da.
typical marriage vow and experience. But we will say too, we'll have to remind ourselves next week, Jen, to when we share the for worse, we are going to look at some positive, proactive, godly ways to try to handle ourselves when we're in the for worse. Now, we're going to be
Yep.
honest with you and say, hey, this is what for worse can sometimes look like,
Hmm.
but we're going to end on a positive and again give you some proactive things and say, well, how can we help with that? And we'll
Right.
have to remind ourselves that it's not like, okay, the beginning of your marriage is supposed to just be all the better, and later on, sorry, your
Yeah.
marriage is just going to be horrible. And it's not a first it's better and then it's worse. We're saying that there can be worse times that
Hmm.
come in and out
Yep.
through a marriage, but a marriage is a lifelong commitment. And so we'll
Yep.
have to remind ourselves that sometimes, oftentimes, even though we go through some worse, the better times will come again. And
Yeah.
sometimes the challenges that we face, just like James talks about perseverance, right?
Hmm.
It can actually make things better in the long run,
Right.
if we address some issues and some challenges. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in here to Life Matters with Nate and Jen. This is episode number 5. Better, and appreciate all the encouragement. If you have a suggestion or something that you would like to share with
Hmm.
us, and if you would like prayers regarding your marriage or your family or any other situation, you can reach out to us at nate@firedfortruth.org. And we just thank you for your kind attention. We pray that you will be blessed by the things that we've shared, and that you will also encourage us, as we push forward.
Hmm.
It's not been an easy year. We've had our share of challenges, and but we do appreciate all the prayer support, and we thank you so much. We pray that you'll be blessed and take care until we see you next time.
Bye bye.